welcome everyone. My name is Janet and I'm working through the King James Bible through the book of Genesis right now, and I'm on chapters 46 to 48 today, so we'll get straight into those. So let's start with Genesis 46. And this is where Israel, or you could call him Jacob because he gets constantly changed the name. Remember, Jacob was the one who was the twin with Ishua, so he's the twin of Isaac. And he was the one who was nipping at his brother's heel when he came out of the womb. So he was named Jacob because that word means deceiver. And it gets changed interchangeable between when you read the scriptures. So sometimes he's referred to as Israel, and other times he's referred to as Jacob because God renamed him Israel. And for me personally, I think that's more to do with when he's being described as Israel, he's more seen as that holy, connected to God person, whereas when he's Jacob, it's more of the flesh, of the human way of being in the world. When Adam and Eve took that fruit from the tree and they got the tree of knowledge in their minds were opened, remember, to good and evil. And so I think Jacob is that mind, and when he's not, he's without the tree of knowledge. He is just the tree of life. That's how I see it anyway. Okay, on with today's chapter. So Jacob is setting off now for Egypt, because if you remember in the last chapter, he just realized, he found out that his son Joseph is still alive and he is the governor of Egypt. So now they are all heading over there because they're going to the land of plenty, because where they live in Canaan, there is a famine. So off Jacob sets for Egypt, and they stop off at Beersheba. And this in the night is when Jacob goes to sleep, and the Lord God speaks to him, and he comes towards him and says, I am the father of Isaac and Abraham. And he says, Jacob. So he calls for Jacob, and Jacob says, here I am, Lord, here I am. And he says, fear not, I will be with you when you go to Egypt, and you will make a great nation there. And you will meet with Joseph, and he will put his hand upon your eyes. That's what he says to him. So then he goes back to his sleep. He wakes up in the morning, and they head off towards Egypt. They take up all their belongings, so they've got all their livestock there, the possessions, everything. The whole family go. And we get a genealogy of the family. They start showing us exactly how many are on their way to Egypt. So we have Jacob's 33 sons and godsons and grandsons with Leah, his first wife, which is the one he didn't really love, remember? Then he has 16 grandchildren and children with Zilpah, which is Leah's servant. Then he has 14 grandchildren and children with Rachel, which was his first love and who he marries secondly. And then 7 children and grandchildren with Bilhah, which is Rachel's servant. So that leaves us with 70 people in total that are heading on their way to Egypt. Now Judah calls ahead. He needs direction because they're headed towards Joshen. So he gets directions to get there. And when they arrive there, Joseph gets his chariot ready and he goes flying to Joshen to meet his father. And they embrace, and it is just like, ah! Because finally he knows his son is alive. His first son to Rachel, his true love. It's just like, so I can imagine it was just a wonderful embrace. You know, it was like, didn't want to let go, couldn't believe that he was still alive, and now he feels he can rest in peace, you know, that when he dies he can rest in peace, not having all this trouble that he lost his son and all this kind of thing. So that is a really beautiful moment. So when they arrive in Egypt, Joseph tells them, okay guys, you need to say that you're all shepherds, because the Egyptians do not favour shepherds at all and they'll leave them alone, so they'll get to live in Joshen without the the ins and outs of the Egyptians, is what I feel anyway. That's what they're kind of saying. So he says, you know, we've got all the livestock here that you've traded with this our whole lives, so you are known as shepherds. And that closes our chapter 46. So next, chapter 47. Israel, or Jacob, meets Pharaoh. So Joseph said to Pharaoh, my family have arrived. They brought all their livestock and their possessions, and they are living in Goshen. That's where I put them. They're all there. He took 5 of his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's first question to them is, what is your occupation? And they say, we are shepherds. Our fathers were shepherds, and our fathers' fathers before them were shepherds. We have looked after the land in Canaan with our cattle, and unfortunately the famine has come and we can no longer stay there. Please, we are your servants now. Let us reside in Goshen, for the land is plentiful. Please, will you let us settle there? And then Pharaoh says to Joseph, your fathers and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your family in the best part of the land. And if you have someone with special attributes, then I want them to look after my livestock as well. And then Joseph brings his father, Jacob, to meet Pharaoh. And Pharaoh says, how old are you? That's his first question to him. What's your age? Isn't it so rude in our culture to do that if you ask someone's age? Anyway, he asked him how old he is, and he said, I am 130 years old. And Jacob said he's had a long and difficult life, so it's, you know, it's not without its challenges that he's gone through. And he blesses Pharaoh. So then Joseph's family all settle in Egypt, and they get the best property, and they live in the district of Ramses, which is as Pharaoh directed. That is the place to go. Now this famine is getting worse, you know, it's not getting better by the day, it's getting worse. And the surrounding lands, they have used up all of their money, they have no more money, and they come in their droves towards Egypt and they say, please, please, we've run out of money, please do not see us perish, please can you help us? We need food. And so Joseph looks around, he says, okay, instead of money, we'll take your livestock instead of money for food. And so the people bring their livestock, they take away food, and off they go. And then a year later, they have run out of food again, and the famine is still going on. And they say, please, please, you now have all our livestock, all our money. We have no food. Please do not see us perish. We have our bodies, who we are, and our land. We give this to you. Please don't let us perish. So Joseph decides, okay, I will give you food for your land and for you, and we'll give you seed so you can plant the seed, and then when the crops grow, you must give 1/5 of the crops that grow to Pharaoh, and you can keep the rest and the seed to keep replenishing the land and making it grow. And so that is what they did, and that is one of the laws to this day. And just as a side note, the priests, all of the priests in the lands had their own land. They were given special privileges, so they had their own land and enough food to see them throughout the famine. So they were not in this predicament as the majority of the people. So that law is still down to this day, that 1/5 of all produce must go to Pharaoh. So the Israelites settled in Egypt, in the region of Goshen, and they acquired property and were very fruitful and increased greatly in numbers. And Jacob lived in Egypt for 17 years. At the age of 147, when he was about to die, he called for his son Joseph. And he says this to Joseph. He says, if I found favour in your eyes, put your hand upon my thigh and promise me you will show me kindness and faithfulness. Do not bury me in Egypt, but with my fathers Isaac and Abraham. That's where he wants to be buried. He doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. And he says this to Joseph, and Joseph says, yes, I will do that for you, Father. I will bury you. And he says, swear to me this is what you will do. And he swears to his father this is what he is going to do when he finally passes. And then Joseph just holds his stick there, and he stands, and he just, it must have been like one of those moments, in a movie where you see the end and it like pans out because he's had this great speech and Joseph's agreed, and it's like a significant moment, and that closes chapter 47. Now we move on to chapter 48. And this is where Joseph is called to go see his father because he's not well. He's got notice that his father is really not well at this point. So Joseph rushes to see his father with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And he goes to his father, and Jacob sees them coming in, and he gets all the strength he can muster to sit up and look at his son and his two sons, and who he classes as his own, like Reuben and Simeon, because they are the two sons that were first born with his wife Leah, not with his true love. So it's kind of like that second drop down, which is what Manasseh and Ephraim are to him. So he gives that acknowledgement. And Jacob shares what God has said to him, saying that, he's going to be with him, and that he's granting him these nations, and that he will multiply. It's almost like he's passing down the knowledge that he's been given from the Lord, that was given to his father Isaac, and Isaac was given it from his father Abraham. So it's coming down and down, and now he's passing over that knowledge to his son Joseph to take on. He then tells him about Rachel and where Rachel was buried and how she died. So it's obviously a very emotional moment where he's sharing some of his really deep memories with his son. And he can't see very well, Jacob. He can't see very well, and he doesn't really recognise Manasseh and Ephraim when they come in. Initially, he's kind of a bit blurry. So it's quite emotional when he does sit up and he sees them, and he's quite like, oh, it's my son and it's my grandsons. It's like that moment of, oh, they're here. I'm not dead yet. They're here, and I've got this one moment with them. So I must get all my strength together to do what is really must be done before I pass. And so he puts his hands out, and he puts his right hand over Ephraim, who is the youngest son, and his left hand over Manasseh, who is the oldest son. Now this in tradition should have been the other way around, really, because normally the oldest gets the blessing, the youngest doesn't. And Joseph sees this going on. He thinks it's, whoa, Dad, you're doing the wrong way, you've got the wrong. And he said, no. Jacob says, no, I know what I'm doing, leave me to it. And he blesses the youngest ahead of Manasseh. So he does similar what happened with Joseph himself with his brother Esau. And you saw what turned out there, so it's like he doesn't want the same, I guess, for his sons, and he's not really wanting that. So he's trying to correct it, but there is always something to be learned, I guess, by doing this. There's almost some way by seeing maybe if the youngest, it's like they're carrying on a similar tradition, and let's see now if the youngest does better than the Joseph, but look at how Joseph's life turned out. There's no right or wrong. And I guess this is what, if you look at the Bible, it's trying to get us to see. It's trying to write the right and wrong of the tree of knowledge. It's trying to remove all that by going through these stories in the way that we do. It's like, okay, let's get it so we end up washing out all the separation. There is no separation. So I'm going to put things right by doing the opposite to what is you would class as it being. And let's see if this generation changes the test of time, that kind of thing. So the chapter ends with Jacob wanting to give Joseph one more piece of land. And that closes our chapter 48 today. So there we have it, 3 chapters. And in these 3 chapters, we really see Jacob and Joseph, the family unit, is doing really well. You know, they're leaving in a time of great famine, and they're able to go to a place of, you know, great abundance. Joshen. They go there and they've got all this land, which is, you know, lots of green land where their herds can all graze. They can get enough food in a time where it's so hard for the people around. They're having to come to Egypt and they're having to beg, and they're giving away everything that they own just to stay alive. Whereas Jacob and Joseph, they're in a family unit that has been protected and is going through this stormy season of the famine while people around are really struggling. So it just shows you that. And then within anything, you know, even when you've got everybody, you think they're the only ones surviving, even within those who are having the abundance and plentiful, we've got, you know, Joseph starting to lose his father, and things are starting to change again. There's always change in anything. We've got the change happening in the external with all the people and the famine, and we've got the change in the internal with the Joseph, even though they're abundance, having shifts within the family unit, and then they will then move on, and a new chapter will unfold in how their children then adapt to life, and how they and what they're going to come up against. You know, we all come up against different challenges, and they're set in front of us to test us. Often people have referred to Earth like, you know, a big school. We're here to learn, and we learn from one another by our experiences and how we react in a given moment, you know, and we can choose differently in every moment. So the other interesting thing for me is how Joseph is named Israel for those different names, and how we ourselves, you know, once we're labelled something, it's very hard to break free from that label. So maybe your name locks you into something, you know, locks you into something that you don't feel you are. How would you feel if you replaced your name with a different name, you know, and referred to yourself as somebody different, so that you could then take on a new persona? You could be the person that you really feel you are inside when you're in that space of alignment with the true source that runs through us all. You know, it's how we're breathing, it's how we're here in this world. So there is always something to learn in any given moment. So yes, I wish you a beautiful day, and thanks for being here, and we'll be back again for more chapters within the book of Genesis. Thanks everyone. Bye.